Our 300-acre farm located on the edge of Dartmoor is rich in wildlife, with dense hedgerows, woodland and waterways providing diverse habitats for a range of species. But as we adapt to the pressures of modern-day farming, we find ourselves moving towards a more regenerative approach to restore soil health and protect our own future resources. The primary focus of my photographic project has been to document the areas of our farmland which have been returned to nature, recording the increased biodiversity when given the space to thrive. I began by documenting a 6-acre paddock seen to the left of the screen here. This steep bank is essentially landlocked by a field of corn, which makes it a perfect candidate for a set-aside area. Once the crop has been harvested at the end of summer, the meadow can be grazed by cattle who will help disperse seeds and fertilise, naturally regenerating the soil. As a beef and arable farm, our primary role remains a producer of food. The farm must remain productive not only for the end goal of food production, but to ensure the viability of the business and the security of future generations. An agronomist advises on when and how crops should be treated to generate the highest yield, while scientists warn that this practice is unsustainable. So how did we get here?
For centuries, the patchwork pattern of Britain's countryside has been shaped by the individual skill and labour of farmer and farm worker. Never has Britain's soil been more productive than it is today. Hundreds of thousands of idle acres have been brought into cultivation, while old farmlands are yielding more than ever they did.
This archival video from the 1940s is a poignant reminder of the intense farming practices adopted. In 2022, it was reported that 97% of our wildflower meadows had been lost. I began to undertake practice-based research with regular photo walks around the meadow. This intentional geographic restriction directed focus to discover the rich diversity of this area and observe subtle changes throughout the season. I was careful to combine site visits with existing journeys to reduce the carbon footprint of this project, with early morning sessions rewarding me with the best light. My initial research phase included the sighting of a trail camera, primarily to understand how the area was being inhabited, but with the possibility of utilising footage to support my final body of work, as demonstrated by Stephen Gill in Night Procession. Limiting my work's environmental impact is integral to the spirit of this project, and any additional strain on resources must be carefully considered. I'm intrigued by the use of film production methods, but I couldn't justify the use of these additional resources for this body of work, when I can achieve the desired results by continuing to work digitally, processing and sharing images online, and printing sparingly to assess and collate my images. Throughout this module, I embrace the freedom to experiment and develop my ability to build connections through my work. With the majority of the UK population inhabiting urban areas, often with limited access to the countryside, I aspired to create an immersive experience, bringing this area to life. I began experimenting with ways to preserve the fleeting lifestyle of the abundance of grasses and flowers, initially through the cyanotype process. Influenced by the approach of botanical artist Anna Atkins, I was able to process the prints on site using handmade paper and develop using water from the adjacent stream to align with the ethos of this project. A natural progression led me to the anthrotype, which seemed to align more comfortably with my intentions by using harmless natural dyes such as spinach and turmeric. As my work in progress developed, I began to experiment with multi-layer exposures and was directed towards the work of Deborah Baker, whose use of mixed layers is expressive and vibrant. My intention was to take a subtle approach to cause confusion and uncertainty, drawing the viewer in to comprehend what they were being shown. I constructed several images, but highlighting the importance of printing work, I found that the photographs didn't have the desired effect for me. The regeneration of this field is something I'm emotionally invested in, and I often found myself contemplating the words of Roland Barthes as he reflected on a cherished photograph of his late mother. It exists only for me. For you, it would be nothing but an indifferent picture. Feedback from the tutors and peers has been vital for me to gauge the effectiveness of my work and respond accordingly. I continue to carry out photo sessions drawn towards the soft light of evening and early morning. I began using low angles and subdued lighting to record the diversity of the pasture. On one of these mornings, as I sat amongst the grasses, the meadow slowly came to life with the buzzing and humming of bees and grasshoppers. It was then I realised how powerful the acoustics were in portraying the hive of activity in which I was encompassed. I began to collate a series of audio clips to present alongside my work. Feedback on this has highlighted how still images set against audio can be far more powerful than video alone. It becomes immersive as the mind is free to study the frame. Turning my attention towards my final presentation, I contemplated an outdoor exhibition which would support my immersive objective by allowing viewers to contemplate the photographs in the environment they were made. However, asking people to travel to this isolated location would have a negative effect on the environmental impact. I would also be limiting my audience to a small number of people who would actively support this event, as opposed to a wider catchment of those who might incidentally stumble across it. I'm drawn to the concept of a mobile exhibition, which can be displayed in accessible locations which align with my intended audiences, such as farming conferences, young farmers club meetings, and wildlife charity events. Using three-sided display boards would allow visitors space to move around the images. They would not be directed or led around the exhibition space, but would be given the freedom to explore and chance upon the images at random. This structure would also support the use of immersive audio, with hardware stored behind the images. Inspired by various small books, I also developed a tactile presentation of my work. An accordion fold supported the unstructured viewing of my images, allowing various pairings and layouts. As I developed my theoretical knowledge, I discovered a quiet movement of farmers adopting methods which allowed farming to work alongside nature. Organisations such as FarmEd, through which I came across the book of Sarah Langford.
My grandfather was a post-war farmer, so he was very clear about his position. It was to feed the world in whatever way he could, using whatever methods he could. And he was encouraged to do it, paid to do it, admired by his government and his community for doing that. One generation later, my uncle became a farmer and soon found himself accused of ecological mismanagement. And I wanted to figure out how we went from hero to villain so fast and where we were going next.
Whilst my project remains environmentally focused, my research has drawn me to consider the human element of our farming traditions. I envisage strengthening the narrative by reaching out to fellow farmers who are currently adopting regenerative farming practices, highlighting what can be achieved, the challenges they face, and their visions for the future of farming.